I believe that we are live, although there is like a 20 or 30-second delay, and I don't trust that we're live until I see it on my other screen here. So I will tell you if everything is good here in a moment. And there's my face. There's my face live. All right, well, I am live here with Robert Spencer. We've got some important issues to talk. Since we're here at the beginning, while people are logging on, why doesn't everyone who has a Twitter account or Facebook account go ahead and send out the link here saying that we're live? As a matter of fact, I'm going to do that right now. I guess this is good afternoon and good evening and good morning, depending on which part of the world you're in. And we know people watch from around the world when they hear that David Wood and Robert Spencer have something going on. So why doesn't everyone tell us where you're watching from? And while you're doing that, Robert, could you introduce yourself for everyone? And we're all going to take a moment to send out this link on Twitter.
Yeah, I am Robert Spencer. David, I'm director of Jihad Watch, which is a program of the David Horowitz Freedom Center where I'm Shillman Fellow. The Jihad Watch is dedicated to explaining the motivating ideology behind jihad terror, which is the one thing that people want to cover up, ignore, deny, obfuscate, lie about today. And so at Jihad Watch, we show news items every day at jihadwatch.org that illustrate what the jihadis are doing and, above all, explain why they're doing it, which is the one thing that is left out most of the time. I'm the author of 18 books, including many best-selling books, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, The Truth About Muhammad, and now The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS, the first and only comprehensive narrative history of jihad in the English language, or any other language that I know of for that matter. This is the first time this has been done. The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS, Run, Don't Walk, as soon as this live broadcast is over.
Yeah, and I'm on chapter 7 right now, just so everyone knows, and that's in my top 3 books on Islam. Period. Right now, on anything dealing with jihad, certainly number 1. So on my list of books, because people always ask me, David, I want to get started dealing with Islam. Where do I start? Robert's new book, History of Jihad, is in that top 3 list of where I would tell people to start. So in case anyone's wondering, if you want to get started in dealing with Islam, and mainly I'm thinking of for people who want to be apologists, Nabil's book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, I would start there. And then the other 2 would be Answering Islam by Norm Geisler and Abdul Salib, and Robert's book. And you get a well-rounded picture there. Nabil gives a good background of what it's like to grow up as a Muslim and what it's like to convert and the basic issues that he had to struggle with. Answering Islam gives a good overall picture of what Islam teaches and how to respond to objections from a Christian perspective. And then but you have to know about jihad. You have to know the ins and outs of jihad. And yeah, phenomenal book so far. And Robert and I talked about this on the live stream that we did, but before I started reading it, where just looking through just skimming through the contents, it was clear that even for people like me who discuss jihad regularly, speak on jihad, debate on jihad, even people like me, we tend to focus on the life of Muhammad, maybe a little bit on the rightly guided caliphs, and then a few other events down through history up until the present. So we study early Islamic history, and then the present, with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all of that. All of the middle of the stuff, which is most of Islamic history, we almost never study. So the vast majority of the information I've read so far in Robert's book was completely new to me. And I've been studying Islam for years and debating Muslims for years, and I've debated jihad and terrorism and so on multiple times with Muslims in different countries. and tons of new information. But if you get that information down, it's over, right? If you get a few thousand people, I would say a few thousand people who know the information in that book, it's over, right? There's going to be that's enough people. That's enough people because the situation that we have right now in the world is you've got a couple of people who know the information in that book, and they're all smeared as evil liars by people who don't know what's in the book. And so, if you actually had a few thousand people learn the material really, really well, it's all over. It's all over for people who are protecting jihad from criticism. So this is, I think, it's either the fourth or the fifth book I've read from you there, Robert. Way back in the day, before anyone had ever heard of David Wood, I read the Politically Incorrect Guide. Is that what it's called? Politically Incorrect Guide to
That's the one.
was it Islam and the Crusade? What was it?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
So that was the first one I read, and then I read The Truth About Muhammad, which, now this is a sad state of affairs. I mentioned my top 3 books for people who want to study apologetics. If I mentioned the top 5, I would have The Truth About Muhammad in there as well. That would be in the top 5. So Robert would be the only person with 2 books on the top 5 list there.
I feel like the Beatles.
Yeah. Now, everyone, just so everyone knows, Robert is in a hotel room, so the internet there is going to be unpredictable because, people two rooms down might be logging on to Netflix and watching a bunch of stuff, so might be glitchy. If Robert gets glitchy and we miss what he says, I'll just inform him that someone's logging on to Netflix, and so could he back up a little bit? Shouldn't be a problem. But the issue we want to discuss is Asia Bibi. I just posted a video recently, and Robert's been posting about Asia as well. And man, just a couple of days. How did you feel a couple of days ago, Robert, when they announced that she was her conviction had been overturned?
I was stunned because I never thought that they were going to let her go, and I was amazed, even more amazed, David, after I read the ruling, which I quoted in a couple of articles. The ruling is a complete Sharia ruling, and it maintains that, of course, if somebody actually blasphemes Muhammad, then he or she has to be punished, and the penalty is death. Makes that perfectly clear. All it does is dispute the evidence in the Asia Bibi case, and on that basis says that she needs to be freed. And so that was great elation, and then followed by the depths once again.
Yeah, I was. I also wasn't expecting that because this has been going on for about a decade now. She's already been on death row for 8 years. She's already been to court. She's already had her appeal, and everyone was affirming the conviction. And so it got down to the Supreme Court, and we've just seen over and over again. We've seen over and over again how the leaders in Pakistan just cave to the cries of the mob. But let's go ahead and back up. We want to take people through step by step so they understand the situation. First, let's back up just to Sharia blasphemy laws, because as you probably know, Robert, there are people here in the West who don't believe that Sharia is a thing, right? It's just in our imaginations. And there are Muslims who claim this, right? Sharia is just, it's like praying, but it's not any legal system that you could really nail down as having any sort of concrete substance to it. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, it's absurd. Reza Aslan and others have said Sharia, there's so many different versions, so many different understandings that you simply can't generalize about it. That's actually completely false. In reality, Sharia is a very clearly defined body of legal precepts, and there are different versions because there are various schools of jurisprudence. The primary 4 schools among Sunnis are the Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanafi, and Hanbali, and then the Shiite Jafari school, and their Shiites have a few others as well. The Ibadis in Oman have their own. But, of course, since most Muslims are Shiites, most Muslims are Sunnis, they go by one or the other of the Sunni madhahib, the schools of jurisprudence, and their understanding of Islamic law. Now, the multiplicity is less than meets the eye, because these 4 schools, and actually all 8 primary schools of jurisprudence in Islam, agree on 75% of all the rulings. And they only disagree on essentially what's minutiae, or on the gravity of various things. Like female genital mutilation is considered obligatory by the Shafi'i school, but the others think that it's honorable, recommended, a very good thing to do. There's not a single school of jurisprudence that says, oh no, you shouldn't do that. And so when it comes to blasphemy, it's the same thing. We find the same unanimity summed up by a Shafi'i legal manual that says that the death penalty is in place for people who mention, and I quote, something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam. Notice that it doesn't say something false. It doesn't even say something insulting. It says something impermissible. And this is a very important distinction, because that same legal manual, Reliance of the Traveler, or Umdat as-Salik, a Shafi'i manual of Islamic law, it says that the definition of slander is not saying something false, not lying about somebody, but mentioning something that the other person does not want known. Mm-hmm. And so it could be completely true, but if they don't want it known, it's slander. And so I think that should be kept in mind when we hear people, Muslims in America, say that people like you and me are slandering Muhammad. They're not saying we're telling falsehoods about him. They're saying we're saying things that they don't want known about him. And I think the blasphemy law.
This is kind of a little side note here, but the recent ruling of the European Court of Human Rights that if you call Muhammad a pedophile, that it's perfectly reasonable to stop your free speech at something like this, because this is going to break the religious peace. Isn't it interesting how that parallels what we've had in Sharia for centuries, right? That it's not whether it's true or not, it's just whether you're allowed to say it, right?
And they didn't even dispute its truth. They said, well, you can't criticize it because there were dynastic marriages among the European royalty of children. Now, of course, that was 2 children, not one guy who was 54 and a girl who was 9. Mm-hmm. And the consummation of the marriage was long off in the future. So it's not really comparable. But the European Court of Human Rights did not say, oh, no, he didn't marry the 9-year-old. That they knew they couldn't.
Now I'm wondering if we did look at some European ruler who had sex with a minor, and someone in today's world said he was a pedophile. Do you think that person would be brought up on charges for calling a long dead European ruler a pedophile? Do you think someone would be get fined for that, or?
Yeah, hardly. And also it's very unlikely that anybody is going to say, I'm going to marry this 6-year-old because King so-and-so of the Holy Roman Empire or some other long-vanished European polity married a 6-year-old, because I imitate him in all things. Whereas Muhammad, of course, the only reason why we care about Muhammad's marriage to Aisha is because you have people imitating him all over the Islamic world. He's the excellent example of conduct. He is the model for emulation, according to the Quran, chapter 33, verse 21. And so Muslims all over the world are marrying children because Muhammad did it. It must be right. And all the girls of 3rd grade age or over, essentially, in Afghanistan, they're married. And this is taken for granted as being something that's perfectly fine.
Yes, so on the going back to the issue, that was a little tangent there, but it's certainly relevant. Namely, that here we are talking about Sharia blasphemy laws in Islamic countries, and here where you don't actually have Islamic authorities imposing rules, you have Western leaders bending over backwards to impose similar rules, right? It's not to the same extent. They're not putting you to death and so on, but they're criminalizing things that no Westerner in his right mind should ever criminalize. And why? Well, to keep the religious peace. Now think about that, right? That's what the court ruling actually was in the European Court of Human Rights. In order to maintain the religious peace, we have to rule against this woman who called Muhammad a pedophile. And the reason I point that out is this is going to come up in the Asia Bibi case when the Supreme Court that overturned the decision decide they need to keep the religious peace. But that'll be here in a few moments. On this issue of of Sharia. Just I wanted to give one more example. When I first started studying it, it was in relation to the penalty for apostasy, which is death. And what you have in the Muslim sources, you have tons of Muslim sources. You have tons of collections of hadiths, and Muhammad wasn't the most consistent person in the world. He could do something in one situation, do something different in a different situation. Then you had different Muslims recording different stories. These vary in terms of their reliability. But what you have is, if you look at the four schools of Sunni Islamic jurisprudence, you find that they all agree that an apostate has to be killed. Why? Well, Muhammad said very clearly that an apostate has to be killed. But you also see slight variations. The schools disagree on whether you kill a female apostate, right? 3 of the 4 schools say, yes, you kill a female apostate too. And 1 says, no, you don't. You just inflict some sort of punishment on her, depending on whether it's Sunni or Shia. Shias also have don't say that you kill the female apostate. You do something instead. So some would say you lock her up. You beat her when she should be doing her daily prayers. There are also differences among the schools in terms of whether you have to give someone an opportunity to repent or you just kill him. So some will say, yes, you have to give him 3 days to change his mind before you kill him. And others will say, no, you don't have to give him 3 days, you just kill him. And so notice you have the same overarching rule. You kill apostates with some minor variations because they have different sources. They focus on different events and so on. But that's what you have in Sharia. So there is certainly concrete substance to Sharia and to Sharia blasphemy laws, which is why we have these blasphemy laws across the Muslim world in different forms. They all agree you don't get to blaspheme Muhammad. They might disagree on some of the details. So, Robert, that's we know that this is part of Sharia and that this goes right back to Muhammad ordering people to be killed for the things that they've done. How does this involve Asia Bibi?
Asia Bibi was out picking fruit with some Muslim women, and she, let me get it here. She said she told her story in 2013, and she said, I, Asia Bibi, have been sentenced to death because I was thirsty. I'm a prisoner because I used the same cup as these Muslim women, because water served by a Christian woman was regarded as unclean by my stupid fellow fruit pickers. Now, what's notable about that is that just today, David, in the New York Times, there is a Muslim writer, a Pakistani novelist, who says that this idea that Muslims in general cannot drink from the same cup as Christians is borrowing from Hinduism, from the caste system. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Islam.
Nothing. Never read that in the Muslim sources, right?
Well, of course, it's absurd here again. You know, the Quran in chapter 9, verse 28 tells Muslims that the unbelievers are unclean, which means that you don't touch them and you don't touch what they touch, or you have to do the ritual washing if you do. And there are hadiths in which Muhammad says, yes, you should not share the utensils with the people of the book. And of course, the people of the book are the polytheists who were unclean in 928 because the people of the book, the Christians in any case, worship the 3 gods, Allah, Mary, and Jesus, according to the Quran. And so they are unclean. And so Asia Bibi's unclean. She drinks from the cup, and then there gets to be it gets worse because...
Wait, 1 second now, because we're about to go on to how it got worse. I was just thinking, if you had a well-informed person about Islam right there, how awesome would it have been to point out, wait a minute, you're not allowed to drink out of the same cup as a Christian, and yet your prophet said that you could drink water with a dead donkey floating in it. You could have just so you know, this is in your Muslim sources, Muslims, right? Muhammad and his followers were going by a pond of water, and there was a dead donkey floating in the water, and his companion said, I wonder if we're supposed to drink that. We know, let's ask the prophet. And Muhammad said, water is not made impure by anything, so go ahead and drink that water. They had a similar situation when they wanted to do ablutions, And it was a well, but the well was used to dump toilet buckets in, to throw dead animals in, and for women to throw their used menstrual cloths in. That's what this well is used for. It was used for disposal. And when they would put their stuff in there, obviously no one wanted to use it, but Muhammad's followers realized they had a prophet among them, so they asked if they should be using that to perform their ablutions, and Muhammad responded again, water is not made impure by anything. So here they are, using water, rubbing human waste, dead animal carcasses, used menstrual cloths, rubbing it all over them, and drinking dead donkey water. And they're not worried about any of that water having any sort of problem because Muhammad said it's okay. But a Christian woman takes a sip out of your cup, and now we've got a problem. Welcome to Islam, ladies and gentlemen. But what happened after that, Robert?
Well, yeah, just to underscore what you're saying, I have it right here. It's a Sahih, reliable hadith from Sunan ibn Majah, and Abu Thalaba al-Kushani says to Muhammad, O Messenger of Allah, we live in a land of the people of the book, and we eat from their vessels. And Muhammad says, as for what you say about living in a land of the people of the book, do not eat from their vessels, unless you can find no alternative. If you can find no alternative, then wash them, and then eat from them. Mm-hmm. So it's clear that the dead donkeys, the dirty rags, everything, that's all fine. That's better. Mm-hmm. More clean than a Christian's cup.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. We are, according to the Quran, the worst of creatures, right? Chapter 98, verse 6. We are the worst of creatures. So we're worse than a dog or a dead dog or anything you're going to be dumping in that well. We're just that disgusting. And so we understand why they would get upset. We reject Muhammad's teachings, but once you accept Muhammad's teachings, perfectly straightforward why you would be upset that a Christian drank out of your cup or your bucket.
Yes. So what happened then, it really takes, it's a story of biblical dimensions. A Muslim woman says to Asia Bibi and to the crowd of Muslim women around who are picking fruit, listen, all of you, this Christian has dirtied the water in the well by drinking from our cup and dipping it back several times. Now the water is unclean and we can't drink it because of her. And Asia stands up at this point and she says, I think Jesus would see this differently from how Muhammad sees it, which is certainly true. We've just been explaining how Muhammad would see it, whereas Jesus declared all foods clean, and so she was absolutely right about that and shows the knowledge of her own faith as well as of Islam. But this just made the Muslim women even more angry. They started yelling at her, how dare you think for the Prophet, you filthy animal. That's right, you're just a filthy Christian. You've contaminated our water, and now you dare speak for the Prophet. You stupid, I'm not going to continue to quote them, but they pick up saying, your Jesus did not even have a proper father. Don't you know that? You should convert to Islam to redeem yourself for your filthy religion. And Asia Bibi responded, and this is why she was arrested, I'm not going to convert. I believe in my religion and in Jesus Christ who died on the cross for the sins of mankind. What did your prophet Muhammad ever do to save mankind? And why should it be me who converts instead of you? For that, she's been 8 years in prison, sentenced to death, and now released. The nationwide riots that the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Islamic group, they blocked roads in order to prevent her from escaping the country, and they ultimately brought the Pakistani government to heel. The Pakistani government surrendered and said it would bar her from leaving the country, which is essentially saying go ahead and kill her, and ordered a review. So this Supreme Court decision, even though it was a fully Sharia-compliant decision, is going to be reviewed. I expect it will be reversed, and she will be sentenced to death again. And
everyone out there, think about this situation, right? So she gets convicted of blasphemy. It goes up to a higher court. They uphold it. Eventually goes to the Supreme Court, and they decide that the judges on the Supreme Court are thinking, hey, should have pretty high standards of proof if we're talking about sentencing someone to death for blasphemy. And there's just almost no real evidence here. There's just a bunch of people screaming, you have to kill her. So we're going to rule in her favor. And then because of the riots in the streets. And by the way, some people are in the comment section are posting comments from Pakistan about the situation. David, the whole of Lahore was shut down. Both my kids not able to go to school. Whole country being shut down, guys. This whole thing is a mess. So big disaster going on there. And we saw the news reports of what's going on over in Pakistan. But I mean, just think about how bad this is, where you can have judges who are trained in the law. These are the Supreme Court judges. So these are supposed to be your top of the line judges, the best judges you have. And the best judges you have say, no, we have to overturn this. There wasn't enough evidence against her. And then because of violence and threats and riots in the streets and burning things, that court then says, okay, we'll rethink this. We'll reevaluate our decision and not allow her to leave and gain asylum in some other country. And so we'll just keep her here and decide if we should have maintained that verdict. Because one, I've read that it takes the Supreme Court years to go through its decision, to reevaluate their decision. So already she's in trouble for still years to come. But second, I mean, think about that situation where the people who are educated in the law, the top lawyers, they say, no, she's not guilty. And then a violent mob gets to make them, okay, well, yeah, according to the law, she hadn't done anything, but there are enough violent people out there that we're scared of that we're going to change our mind. I mean, that would be bad enough if it was something stupid, right? I was just watching a football game before we got on here. I mean, imagine someone commits a penalty, pass interference, and the crowd says, "Well, we'll kill you if you if you do that, if you throw that flag." And then so the official, the referee, picks the flag back up. Well, I don't want to be killed over this, so I'll just give in. That's horrifying. I mean, that is horrifying, where the mob gets to decide court decisions. But that's what you have in Pakistan, and what they really seem to want. That what the masses really seem to want in Pakistan is any vague accusation against someone should be enough to just kill you over. And especially if it's a Christian. How dare you say that a Christian could ever defend herself against accusations of a Muslim, and that you would even think about listening to listening to that Christian's defense when a Muslim is the one accusing her. It's horribly, horribly disturbing. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole legal process there. I encourage people to read the decision. It's publicly available. It's entering into another world to read it. It says that she swore that she had respect for Muhammad and Islam, and thus there was no reason to hold her on that basis. And I think, why does she have to? She has to do this because they'll kill her otherwise. Mm-hmm. And notice that she's only being charged with blasphemy in that bit of her story that I read for affirming the Christian faith. She didn't say anything actually that was false, and she didn't even say anything that was insulting to Muhammad. She said Jesus Christ died to save mankind. Muhammad doesn't save anyone, which is Muslims would agree if they were being rational about this and say, yeah, Muhammad is not the savior. That's not how Islam works. Muhammad is not the Muslim Jesus. He brings the Quran, and if you abide by the laws that Allah sets out, then you have a chance to be saved if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds. But what she said was obviously true. And what they're doing by calling this blasphemy is essentially criminalizing the Christian faith altogether, such that any Christian in Pakistan could be arrested, could be confronted by a Muslim who says, "Do you believe Muhammad is a prophet?" And he says, "No." And that's blasphemy. If Asia Bibi is blasphemed, then any affirmation of the Christian faith and denial of Islam is blasphemy. And this is where Pakistan is going, and of course this is where the West is going as well with the European Court on Human Rights decision.
And as well, if any Muslim can just come up and say, "Hey, this person blasphemed," I mean, think about what that allows, right? If a Muslim walks up to a Christian woman and says, hey, I want to have sex with you, get naked, come back and have sex with me, and you say no, all he has to say, she just blasphemed, she just said Muhammad's a false prophet and that he's a pedophile, and she gets sentenced to death. Well, what message does that send to the next Christian, right? The message that sends to the next Christian, you say, hey, get naked and come back, and me and my buddies are going to gang rape you like they do in UK. What can you possibly do? And so anyway, that's the situation that Pakistan is in right now, and Pakistan has a difficult road forward because they have to decide, right? And that's what they're doing. They're deciding right now. They have to decide, do we want actual order and rule of law and fairness, or do we want mob rule, Islamic mob rule? And they have not decided yet. They've given in, but they could still break through and come out as a better, stronger country. And, you just have to wish that they had someone who was just completely fearless and actually understood, hey, the way you deal with an angry mob is to put the angry mob in its place. And it's gonna hurt. Yeah, there's gonna be riots. Yeah, there's gonna be stuff burned. But you don't give an inch to the mob, right? Robert, think what does this encourage, right? How is the mob being encouraged here, right?
Yeah, it's just the same old story all over the world, David. You give in to a bully. It's a lesson that I thought we learned in 5th grade, but everybody seems to have forgotten. That you give in to a bully, you're just encouraging him to bully you more. And you give in to violent intimidation, you're just going to get more violent intimidation. So the Pakistani Supreme Court has devalued the testimony of anybody who's not a Muslim and bowed to the will of the mob, and is essentially saying that if you riot and threaten to kill and close down the country and block roads, then we will give you what you want, which means they're going to get more blocked roads and threats and riots. And it's the same thing as the Garland, Texas shooting, when Pamela Geller and I put on the Muhammad art exhibit and cartoon contest in Garland, Texas in 2015, and jihadis attacked us, and people attacked, mostly they attacked Geller. Those who knew that I was there attacked me as well, saying that we were being disrespectful, that you have to be more solicitous of Muslim sensibilities and not insult Muhammad and so on. And we would explain, well, this wasn't really about that. It was about trying to show that we were not going to give in to this violent intimidation. And these people say the killing of the cartoonists at the Charlie Hebdo magazine in Paris showed that they wanted to kill people who drew Muhammad. So we were going to show that we are not intimidated and we're not going to bow to this bullying. And most of the Western world, most of the intelligentsia, the political and media elites agreed that we were terrible for doing this and that we really needed to give in to the violent intimidation. And this is what we're seeing reinforced again now. Everybody in the whole world seems to have been overtaken by cowardice and thinks that the best way to deal with a bully is to encourage him and allow him to bully you and invite him to bully you again tomorrow.
And we can't emphasize this enough because, that's part of the main takeaway is, as Robert pointed out, this is everywhere. And it goes back even before Charlie Hebdo with the in fact, one of the reasons you had the Charlie Hebdo massacre was in earlier periods where people were backing down over cartoons, right? So you had people, the Danish cartoon controversy where people post some cartoons and then, according to jihadis, people have to die over that. You have to die. Well, Robert, how many people were reposting those cartoons on their news sites after the Danish cartoon controversy, where people were under constant threat of death? How many news sites here in the West responded to that by posting the cartoons in their news stories so that people would understand what the controversy was over?
If I recall correctly, Dave, there were 2. Most of the hundreds of news outlets in the United States and in the West discovered a strange new respect, a desire not to blaspheme and offend Muslims that they never had when they were printing photos of the the Virgin Mary encrusted with dung that was supposedly an artwork that hung in New York City. And the New York Times published a picture of it and said that if you're against this, then you're a Neanderthal, pro-censorship, medieval fundamentalist, and that we have to stand for speech. And the same thing with the crucifix and the jar of urine that got a National Endowment for the Arts Award, a considerable monetary grant, if I recall correctly. And once again, we were warned, we were admonished, we were told we have to accept this. This is blasphemy according to Christians, but they have to understand that we live in a free society where not everybody has the same sensibilities, and we have to have respect for the freedom of speech. That's fine, but they forgot all about it when it came to the cartoons. It got to be absurd. There was a symposium at a major Ivy League university, I think Yale, possibly Harvard, but it's been many years.
I think it was Yale.
It was at Yale.
I think so.
They were having a whole symposium about the cartoon controversy, and they refused to show the cartoons. And another one published, maybe it was Harvard University Press, it might have been both of them. In any case, and the other one published a book about the whole controversy. And the book did not contain reproductions of the cartoons. These people were bowing to Sharia blasphemy laws and bowing to their violent application and violent enforcement without seemingly having any idea of what they're putting what they're bringing our children and our children's children in for by encouraging this kind of bullying and violent intimidation. There's just going to be more of it.
And I think there's you see how this actually has practical results in the world. When a Danish newspaper says, hey, we're posting Muhammad cartoons, and then there's threats and intimidation afterwards, and basically the entire media world backs down and says, okay, whatever you jihadis want, that's what we'll do because you're threatening to kill us. And then eventually you get Charlie Hebdo writers, and they say, well, you can't control us like that. We'll go ahead and post even more cartoons about Muhammad. And then they get massacred. Well, why? Oh, because we taught the jihadis a lesson. If you want to have your way here in the West, just go violent. Just go as violent as possible, and people will back down in order to keep the religious peace, right? So, I mean, think about the situation. If after the Danish cartoon controversy, Western publications had all stood up and said, no, you can't threaten people. We don't even agree with posting these kinds of cartoons of Muhammad, but in the name of freedom of speech and to silence death threats, we're all going to do it at the same time. You can't kill us all. I don't think you'd have the Charlie Hebdo massacre. I don't think that happens, right? And so,
right, absolutely.
Yeah, and so notice you have that situation there, and it's the same situation you have in Pakistan. Once you start backing down and modifying your behavior due to threats of violence, you're encouraging the people who are threatening you with violence. You've given them a way to get what they want. Right? So, I mean, if it were me and the violent mob said, you're going to do what we want, I would say, well, now I got to do the opposite, right? I was just going to let her go. I was just going to let her go and let her go for asylum. Now I'm making her a national holiday, right? We're going to have Asia Bibi Day and celebrate what she said, everything she said. And we're going to let her take the mic on schools around the country and say whatever she wants about Jesus and how Muhammad just wasn't as awesome as Jesus. We're going to let her do this. And if you say one more word, you don't want to see what I'm going to do, right? So all you violent mobs, we're the judges here. You're not. We're the experts in law. You're not. Know your role and shut your mouth. And that's how I would roll. And I think they need someone like that, right? I mean, it sucks. And you would have violent responses and more protests and so on, but it's the only thing the jihadis seem to understand, right?
Yeah. I wish you were Prime Minister of Pakistan, David. The real Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, he actually gave the impetus to the rioters before the Supreme Court made its decision. When he first became Prime Minister, he said that we're going to make this blasphemy business a central part of this administration. and we're going to work at the UN to compel the UN to criminalize criticism of religious figures, which means criticism of Islam as far as he's concerned. He doesn't care about any other religious figures. And so when the ruling from Asia Bibi came down, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik people had every reason to believe that Imran Khan was going to be on their side. He's very clearly stated how important this is to him. So they probably expected that he would be out there calling for the same things that they were calling for, and in the end he gave them what they wanted anyway.
Mm-hmm. And this is just a situation where you have massive support for things like Sharia blasphemy laws, and therefore the people who get elected in Pakistan have to appeal to that base and say, yes, I agree with those laws, and I will help you enforce them. And those are just the people who are going to rise to power in Pakistan. And it's just a sad situation. I had with the Asia Bibi ruling, you get just this glimmer of hope. Hey, maybe, because I mean that's a bad place, right? Pakistan, in terms of things going on like this, right? There are. I wouldn't want to live anywhere in the Muslim world, but Pakistan is one of the places I would definitely not want to live in. And so to see, hey, maybe something could actually change in Pakistan. Wow, that was a great feeling for like 8 hours until the started seeing the protests starting and realizing, wow, they can't take it, right? I mean, how much free time do these guys have on their hands? That one peasant worker, one fruit harvester who drinks a cup of water and gets into a little discussion with some Muslim women, that this becomes the main focus of your country. And I mean, just imagine if they took that energy and diverted it towards anything positive in this world, besides demanding the death of a fruit harvester woman, mother of 4. I think we could have some amazing things in the world. Anyway, we are going to close this out by 5. We want to take some questions. So if you have any questions that you have for Robert or for me, you can start posting those now. I'm going to start reading them. But as people are posting those, Robert, here's a situation I'd like you to break down for us, because it seems that everyone in the West realizes, wow, you shouldn't be killing this woman, right? Everyone thinks that's a bad idea. You should not be killing this woman for drinking out of the cup or drinking out of the bucket, for responding when they told her to convert to Islam. You should not be killing this woman at all. It seems that everyone is on the same page there. But as soon as someone like you comes along and says, well, I agree, and therefore I'm going to go to the source of this teaching and respond to the source, namely that this is part of Sharia and that this is based on the teachings and example of Muhammad, because it was Muhammad himself who ordered that people who mocked him or made fun of him had to die. Therefore, we need to, if we don't want the results, we have to go to the root of the problem. If we don't want the fruit, we got to go to the root here, and the root is Muhammad. We have to look at this. And those same people who said, yes, this is wrong, this is evil, will then turn on you and how dare you, you're the worst person in the world for opposing the source of this thing that everyone acknowledges is wrong. I can't decide, are people just this stupid and gullible? Sometimes I think it's a spiritual kind of blindness, right? Because I can't even imagine intelligent people being this dumb on some level. So what's going on?
I do think it's a willful blindness. Of course, there are stupid people and uninformed people in the world. I think there are many people in the United States who still think that Muhammad, he founded a great world religion. He must have been somebody like Gandhi, somebody like Jesus, somebody like Buddha, somebody who was wise and magnanimous and kind and taught benevolence and universal peace and brotherhood. And I think that there are people who also believe that the Quran teaches those things. But at the same time, quite recently, as a matter of fact, I had this idea, and I issued a challenge at my website, Jihad Watch. I said, I wrote a thing called A Message to My Critics, and the subtitle is, if you knew what I knew, you would agree with me. And I said, look, I read this in the Quran. I studied the Quran, and here's my book on the Quran. If you'd read the Quran, you would agree. Here is a written book, a biography of Muhammad. If you had studied the Islamic sources about Muhammad, you would agree. And so on and so on. And of course, Islamic history and all that. And a lot of people responded by saying, oh, they know. It's not that people who say you're a racist and a bigot don't know. It's that it's not convenient for them. That they have their political agendas that involve the destruction of of borders, of the nation state, of the very concept of ethnicity, the very concept of the nation, and you're just in the way. And so they know full well what they're up to. I'm sure there are some people in that camp, as well as some people who are just completely ignorant about these issues.
All right, we are going to. You're absolutely correct. We're going to take some questions here for about the last 10 minutes. One question, Robert, is there going to be another Drawing Muhammad contest?
I would doubt it. It's been 3 years since the first one. We had intended to do more, but the cowardice in the United States is nearly universal nowadays, and getting a venue to hold such an event is well nigh impossible. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that we would be able to find one anywhere in the country at this point.
Yeah, I mean, especially when the last one was attacked, right, in a jihad attack. So guess what? It does work, right? Now, what should the response be? The response should be, there should be some coordination behind the scenes of all these different owners of all the different venues, and they all come together and agree, we're all going to announce on the same day that anyone is welcome to hold this type of event at any one of our locations, and we're just gonna deck it out with security. But no, it's we'll never host anything like this. It's too dangerous, and therefore the message to jihadis everywhere, once again, if you want to get your way in the West, just become as violent as possible, and thinking that this somehow promotes peace.
That reminds me of Molly Norris, David, and remember she was the Seattle Weekly cartoonist, and she had this idea: everybody draw Muhammad Day, which it was very solid reasoning. They can't kill us all. Mm-hmm. And if we all show that we're not going to be intimidated, then they won't keep trying to intimidate us. Mm-hmm. It was a very good idea, but of course she was threatened and went into hiding, even changed her identity. So, so much for that.
But notice there was, after that, there was online an Everybody Draw Muhammad contest, and thousands of people drew cartoons of Muhammad, and no one died. Right? The idea is, what could you do? It's thousands of people all around the world posting cartoons of Muhammad on their various pages and stuff, and nothing happened. Why? Because as long as it's one person or three people or five people or one little group, you can threaten and intimidate them and force them to do what you want through violence. Once everyone just says, no, that's not going to work here, jihadis realize, hey, this is not going to work. So that's the bottom line. Right? You can either send a message, the way to get what you want is through violence, or anytime you resort to violence, no matter what happens, we're going to do the opposite of what you are demanding. And then they realize, well, that just doesn't work. But somehow people don't get the memo.
It hasn't even been tried.
Yeah. Well, one person here. Hi, Robert. How would you spread the message of the good news to these radicals? How do you approach a person who gets antagonized when we approach them? And I guess if he's talking about approaching them in Pakistan, I don't think I would approach. What do you think, Robert?
The blood of the martyrs is the seeds of the church, so they say. And if you were to approach somebody with the gospel in Pakistan, yes, you will probably be arrested and possibly killed. Mm-hmm. If not by the state, then by the mob. Mm-hmm. There was recently, it's been overshadowed by the Asia Bibi case, but there was recently a case of a mentally disabled Christian young man in Pakistan who was sentenced to death just the other day because he burned a booklet that he had found. He was a garbage man, and he burned a booklet because it was on the street. It was garbage. but it turned out to have Quran verses in it. So he's guilty of blasphemy, and he's going to be executed. So this is what happens. If you want to talk to Muslims in the West about the gospel, that's of course a different thing. You might find various rude reactions. I know of a Catholic priest who sent out leaflets in his area and got a furious call from a Muslim saying, "You have no right to send me this." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "It's against the law." And of course he was thinking back in Syria or Iraq or where it's from, it is against the law. Mm-hmm. But in America, it just makes people angry. You have to be tread very carefully. I'm not saying don't do it. Mm-hmm. There are ways to speak to Muslims about the gospel, point out that Jesus is the Word of God, is sinless in Islamic tradition, is going to return at the end of the world. None of these things are true of Muhammad, and yet Muhammad is supposed to be the greater prophet. And many people have converted to Christianity when they start to ponder on those things and realize that the Quran and its teachings on Jesus is just an amalgamation of radical Christian texts that don't have any coherence of themselves, and they start to look out. It can be done, it should be done, but it's a very dangerous thing to do, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And as far as I was thinking on the issue, when I'm saying, hey, I'm referring to people like who are rioting and stuff like that and burning things. Not a good time to run up. I mean, there are Christians, I believe, who are called to jump up on a platform and go ahead and blast the truth in that situation. But I don't think a person in that situation is necessarily even in a state of mind to understand anything you're saying. And so usually when people from Pakistan are asking, how can I tell these guys about Muhammad? How can I tell them about the things their prophet did? I usually respond, don't. Let us do it, right? Let us do it online, right? It's much safer. Let us spread the information about Muhammad. If you do get into a situation where you have like a Muslim friend or something like that, and you're in Pakistan and you have the opportunity to share the gospel, of course you'll want to do that. You would want to be careful in an area where you could be killed for it. But one thing that actually helps is two things really. One, asking questions instead of just saying everything, leading the person through thinking it through for themselves by asking questions. So, what do you believe about God? How do you believe that God is going to deal with our sins? What do you think about what Jesus said here and stuff like that? There, you're not making any claims that they could say, okay, you have to die for that. But you're leading them through the same exact thought process. But another thing that's kind of related to that is to have person read something for themselves. If they're asking, hey, why should I believe this? And say, okay, well, could you read this passage right here from what Jesus said, right? And let them read it for themselves. And then, so what do you think he means there? What do you think he's saying? Notice you're not saying anything that they could riot and kill over. Now, they might always invent something, but if you're just trying to be as careful as possible, there are multiple ways to make a point and to get a message across and to get information across to someone. As far as the blasting away at Muhammad and blasting away at the foundations of Islam, unless you have a special calling to that and you are ready and willing to die to do that, I would leave that to people outside of Pakistan. Because we still have access to Pakistanis. They still have internet connections, so we could get that information across. And once that happens, once enough information about Muhammad gets out there, a lot of people's confidence in Muhammad is going to be shaken, and that's going to free things up for people like you to share the gospel and not be threatened with death. All right, we're actually only have a couple more minutes here. Well, there's a lot of comments here. I don't know if we can get through to many of these. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up with some final thoughts. As far as I know, Asia Bibi's family isn't under any restrictions, travel restrictions right now, and her husband and the rest of her family have asked for asylum, and I expect that they'll get it. And so as far as I know, they are actually allowed to leave. I think that, Robert, didn't the lawyer already leave?
Yes. The lawyer left while paradoxically saying that he had to leave in order to continue to fight for Asia Bibi. I don't know how he intends to do that while he's not even in the country, but I'm sure he knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, he's got a point. If he stays, he's going to die. They already killed two politicians. They already killed two politicians for speaking up on her behalf and saying that she shouldn't be killed. And so he had entirely legitimate concerns about his safety.
It's also worth noting, David, that one of those, Salman Taseer, was killed by a man who became a hero. Yep. And there is a very large mosque named for him. I forget his name right now, but it doesn't matter. The point is that it's not as if this is some tiny minority and the vast majority of Pakistanis are against all this. He's celebrated as a great hero for killing Salman Taseer, the politician who was against the blasphemy laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that just shows you how popular this ideology is in Pakistan. So as far as moving forward, man, that's got to be rough, right? That's got to be rough for the husband and the daughters and so on to leave if Asia's not allowed to leave, right? I mean, that's got to be like the roughest decision you could possibly make. You know they're coming to kill you, so the only way you're going to be safe is if you get out of the country, and yet you may be leaving your wife or your mother behind while she still has to wait. But if you're the father, hey, this is the only way. This is the only way I can keep my family alive. So that is a really, really tough situation to make, and that is the situation that this family is being forced into. And
yes.
I mean, gosh, man. I mean, think about this, right? Robert, you've got kids. I've got kids. You've got a wife. I've got a wife. Our wives were, under an Islamic death sentence and being reviewed, and we either have to protect our kids or stay with the wife. That is, what do you think about that situation?
It's a terrible choice. It shows, I think, that above all, David, shows how evil this is and what dark and demonic forces are working here, that this poor man has to make this decision, and that he has to either essentially sacrifice his wife or sacrifice his children. Mm-hmm. And then he has to live with having done so. And it's all just so it's a concentration of evil that makes me ashamed that nobody in the West who has power and influence is standing up to do anything about the situation.
Mm-hmm. And that is, so that's Islam, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the situation Islam puts the world in. And yet, once again, if you say that there's a problem here that goes back to Muhammad, that there's a problem that goes back to Sharia, that there's a problem that goes back to the Quran or the Hadith, you have to be a racist or a bigot. And so there are basically three things at work here in these kinds of situations. One, you've got Muhammad and his teachings and deeds. And two, you've got a lot of people in the world today who are willing to follow Muhammad's teachings and pattern themselves after Muhammad's conduct. And three, you don't have anywhere near enough people speaking out about it, right? So notice you could have Muhammad 14 centuries ago say all kinds of horrible things. If there aren't a lot of people who are willing to carry it out, it doesn't really matter. But you have a ton of people willing to carry out those teachings and commands. So the only way to do something about that would be having enough people to say no to that. But the only people who say no have abuse heaped upon them by Westerners who should know better. Anyway, that's the sad situation that we find ourselves in. So if you want to do something about it, ladies and gentlemen, there are all kinds of ways. You all kinds of articles to read, videos to watch, books to read. Make sure you get some of Robert's most important works to study jihad. You'll want to get the history of jihad. Go to Amazon, grab that now. The Truth About Muhammad, excellent overview of Muhammad's life. You'll want to read those books. You'll want to follow Jihad Watch if that's the issue you're primarily interested in. But if you're watching this, it seems like you're either a Muslim, coming to troll or sometimes there are Muslims who are actually, interested in having serious discussions. But the rest of you here, are probably interested in this topic. You understand the threat that Islam poses in the world and you want to do something about it. And step one would be figuring out what you're primarily focused in. If you want to, refute the prophethood of Muhammad, or you want to learn how to respond to objections against Christianity, or you want to respond to jihad, or to Muhammad's teachings that have to do with grooming gangs in the UK, whatever it is that you want to do, figure out what you want to do, and then learn some material, learn some things well, and then go out and share what you've learned. Any final words here before we close out, Robert?
Well, that sums it up all very well, David. I would say that I hope that everybody who prays will be praying for Asia Bibi, and understanding also that this is a real showdown. This is a watershed event, and a great deal will flow from it in terms of how emboldened the supremacists in Islam and those who would bully us into submission will be. And so we can only hope, we should call upon our elected officials to make this an issue in Washington as well, as much as we can, and try to stem the tide and turn the Pakistani government around to protecting human rights, to protecting this poor woman, and to beating back the baying mob.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, do everything you can. Call on your leaders, right? Western leaders do have power in places like Pakistan. Western leaders do provide places like Pakistan with money. So, perfect opportunity to say, hey, whatever clout we have, we need to use that for situations just like this. And as for you, Pakistani Muslims who are watching, just know, if that woman is ever killed, or if she doesn't end up in the next few weeks in some much safer place, you have not seen abuse heaped upon your prophet. Because I'll be coming for you. And you are going to have to get a UN resolution to stop the rain of fire that I bring down on your prophet. So, words to the wise. Anyway, we'll see you all next time. Next time a topic rises that we want to discuss here on the live stream. Thank you all for tuning in, and talk to you all next time.